I look like I got punched in the face, but it was just because of a gym injury. So forget my face for now. But we have to talk about the IPO. Okay, so today we have a different setup because I kind of want to talk a little bit more about the IPO, and I thought that I want to use the Bloomberg article so that you can actually go through the whole entire article in more details. And of course, so I did a little bit of a layout. So of course, if you do enjoy this kind of video, please drop a like down below, and of course subscribe to my channel. I do upload videos every single Wednesday and every Saturdays as well. Alright, so let's talk about the IPO. For people who are unaware, this is SoftBank's effectively biggest IPO. Not just SoftBank, actually, we are expecting this to actually be the biggest IPO ever. Okay, this is like even bigger than Rivian, bigger than Facebook, bigger than Alibaba, and all these different huge IPOs that we actually had in the recent years. Okay, so SoftBank, I do need to let you guys know, okay, I think that it is a little bit misleading. You might think that SoftBank is a bank. It's not a bank. SoftBank is an investing group. Okay, so they do have an arm holding, which they are basically going to be going through the IPO process. Over here, you can see that they are going through the IPO. For people who are unaware what ARM actually do, they actually am a designer of phone chips, but more so than just a designer of phone chips, they actually do the coding behind the AI for all these different chips. Okay, so for example, you're talking about all these different chips in the market as it is. I think only Intel is the one that's not using ARM, the ARM programming. I think everyone else, most of them are already using the ARM programming. I think for Intel, they're using x86. But anyway, basically where they actually earn most of their money from is actually from licensing this programming code script sort of thing to all the different AI manufacturers, all these chips manufacturers, and that's where they actually earn most of their money. Okay, so a successful debut by ARM would provide a windfall for SoftBank founder Masayoshi, whose Vision Fund lost a record $30 billion last year. For people who are unaware, I think last year a lot of big companies did lose a lot of money, especially due to the correction that happened in the market, especially after what happened back in 2020 when we had such a huge rise, and then with a huge rise came with hyperinflation, and then came with interest rates, yada yada yada, and then a lot of people just went to nothingness, and then a lot of companies lost a lot of money. So over here you can see that this would be a huge thing for SoftBank, which is why I do want to let you guys know that having an IPO for a company is not going to be really exactly good for people who are investing into the company. It just means that you have an entry to a company. But the real people who are going to be making the most amount of money is going to be this guy, Masayoshi. Son Masayoshi, I think he's going to be making a lot of money. Although they did talk a little bit more about how they do not want to be selling a lot of shares as well. I'm going to be covering that in more details in a bit. But anyway, they go through with the whole entire regulatory filing. And of course, the offering is being led by Barclays, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Mizuho Financial Group. Basically, a lot of all these underwriters, which is pretty good. Okay, so ARM plans to start its roadshow the first week of September, price the IPO the following week. The company didn't disclose the proposed terms of a share sale in the document, but is expected to seek a valuation of $60 billion to $70 billion. Okay, so over here you can see that because ARM is trying to raise about $8 billion to $10 billion in the IPO, and the target could be lower since SoftBank has decided to hold on to more of the company after buying Vision's fund stake in it. Okay, so it's quite clear to say that what ARM is trying to do is that they do want to hold a little bit more market share rather than just liquidating a lot of the market share. So clearly there is a good business going on there somewhere. Okay, so we're expecting ARM to be getting about $8 to $10 billion. I think this IPO is going to be quite successful, but I don't think. Okay, unlike a lot of people, especially from the bear camp, I am from the bear camp, but a bear camp for ARM or a bear camp for Chinese stocks in general, they might think that after this huge IPO that actually happens, it's going to be followed with a rug pull and things like that. I don't think it's going to be happening with an immediate rug pull. I think what's going to be happening is going to be more so maybe like 30% over like a year. I do think that they are not going to be hitting IPO's highs, They're not going to be they're not going to go up higher and higher. I think it's going to be a lot similar to what Coinbase actually went through when they actually went through their IPO. They were really hyped up about it. People were happy to actually get into Coinbase, myself included, of course. You can find some videos about me talking about Coinbase. I think it's going to be on my channel a few years ago. You can check that out if you are interested in those back then. But yeah, I do think that I don't think this is going to be that big of an IPO. It's gonna just go up, and the IPO is gonna be where the peak is at. I don't think it's gonna go all the way upwards. If anything, I'll be more excited to be investing into Nvidia, because Nvidia is actually doing the chips, and they're actually doing the servers, they're actually doing all the services and such. So I think Nvidia will be a better play if I personally want to be bullish onto the whole entire AI scene, chips manufacturing scenes and such. Which also coincidentally, because we would be getting our Nvidia earnings after hours today, if I'm not mistaken. So I might be staying up late today to go through the earnings report. I'm not sure if I'm going to be making a video about it, or I might just be going through some of the important points and then just posting it on my Instagram story. So if you're not following me on Instagram just yet, right up here, that's my handle. If you do want, you can go down to the link in the description box down below. I do have it linked as well. Just drop me a follow, just check out my stories. I do post a lot about current affairs, about news, about the markets, about politics, and also about my personal life. So if that's your cup of tea, follow down below. Okay, but anyway, we have to talk about the offering promises to give the struggling IPO market its biggest lift in almost 2 years. The listing is poised to be the largest in the US's electric vehicle, Rivian, like I talked about earlier, because they were in 2021 they did quite a huge IPO. It could rank near or even below tech industry largest IPO, which is Alibaba in 2014, and then in 2012, $16 billion with the Meta platforms, which was formerly known as Facebook when they did the whole IPO. Okay, so over here you can kind of see the chart that they basically is thinking about how it would actually turn out to be. SoftBank envisioned to be one of tech history's largest IPO. Right now, Alibaba is at the highest, which is at $25 billion. I think Alibaba, rightfully so, they are pretty high up in the tech industry, especially for China side. They did have a pretty good business model when I was actually going through the whole entire Alibaba breakdown a few years ago. So pretty cool. Okay, but for here right now, they're actually looking at ARM getting about $10 billion for the amount raised in the IPO. I do somehow believe that it's going to be somewhere actually a lot lower. I would imagine somewhere in the 6 to 7 billion instead of in the 8 to 10 billion dollars. But okay. Over here you can see ARM target valuation reflects a belief that it will benefit from the stampede towards artificial intelligence chips and generative AI, an industry shift that has helped chip maker Nvidia a $1.2 trillion valuation. So for people who are unaware, Nvidia actually reached over $1 trillion in valuation, and I think they are pretty much cemented into it. Right now they are holding their ground at a whopping $1.16 trillion in the pre-market of Tuesday. So I do think that Nvidia, most likely they're going to be just staying as a constant in the $1 trillion club. Of course, you never know, because like how Apple was as well. Apple was already in the $3 trillion region, the club of one, and then somehow they actually faltered and then they went back down. So right now they are comfortably below $3 trillion. They're at about $2.75 trillion. So you can never be too sure. Okay, you can never be too sure. Okay, so a strong performance from ARM will not only be a major windfall for SoftBank, but also reinforce its AI strategy by showing that market hype around AI hasn't waned. Okay, I do think that this is slightly controversial, I would say, simply because I do think that what happened in the early half of 2023 was that any company who basically mentioned the word AI, they basically had a huge jump in their share price. Anyone who said that they are thinking about implementing AI, they are thinking about using AI to make it convenient for different workflows. People who want to use AI in any sort of workflow, any sort of capacity in all these different listed companies, they all just basically got a 20% boost back in the early half of 2023. So I think that the hype for AI is starting to die down a little bit. Okay, and I'm not saying that, in 2024 we're not going to be talking about AI at all. I do think that AI is going to be a constant thing that we would have to talk about. We have to talk about how it's progressing, how it's going to be helping different companies, what ways is it actually helping the different companies. So I don't think the hype around AI will eventually wane. But I do think that right now they're talking about how ARM is going to be this huge AI strategy to show that the market's hype around AI hasn't waned. I don't think that's particularly the case. I think that the AI hype has definitely calmed down a little bit, because companies who are talking about AI right now, they're not exactly having the same amount of hype, the amount of jump that we actually saw back in the early half of 2023. So the thing is that it's clear to say that a lot of companies are already starting to be like, yeah, it's normal for you to have AI. We are starting to price in a lot of different companies' valuation that AI is definitely in the books. They are definitely in their plans in the near future for them to actually implement. So I'm not sure. I think AI hype is starting to die down a little bit. I'm not saying that AI is not going to be important. The hype for it definitely has died down a little bit. So though ARM's technology is used in almost every smartphone, it isn't well known among consumer, which is true. Like I told you before, the thing is that for ARM's technology is actually just a basic programming script of sorts for chips, and they're actually in our phones, it's in our watches, it's in our computers. There's a lot of chips that actually use ARM technology, which is why I'm saying that it doesn't really come as a surprise that ARM is going to be one of the biggest IPO that we're going to be getting this year. Then again, also this year we do have a lot of underwhelming IPOs that actually came out, so nothing too huge. So I do think that ARM technology is definitely not going to be underestimated. Okay, ARM sells the blueprint needed to design microprocessors. The licensed technology known as instruction sets that dictate how software programs communicate with those chips. Like I said before, basically just like the programming language for it. The power efficiency of the ARM technology helped make it ubiquitous on phones where battery life is critical. I do think that iPhones are using ARM. Yeah, I think they are. I'm pretty sure they are actually. They are using ARM's technology, but I'm still kind of uncertain, because Android phones or the Samsung flagship phones, all of them do have better battery life. So I'm not sure if ARM is able to do anything on those end for iPhone. Okay, so let's see over here. Processors for the market are among the most expensive and profitable in the industry. Amazon has adopted ARM-based chips for its AWS because it says that they are more efficient both in terms of energy and economics. They're used by 40,000 AWS customers. So I do think that what the Chinese industry has actually been doing for a lot of different what Chinese companies have been doing for the different industries is that they have actually been trying to, make highly efficient workflows, and also create lesser of a hassle for them to actually create all these different models. So I do think that that's something that China has been doing pretty good. Okay, so I'm not surprised that Amazon actually adopted ARM-based chips for their AWS, and of course, seeing how AWS is going to be Amazon's biggest money maker anyway. Without AWS, Amazon is pretty much dead. So for them to actually put in a lot of money into ARM-based chips, doesn't really come as a surprise to me. Okay, SoftBank will remain the controlling shareholder of ARM after it begins trading. According to the filing, SoftBank, based in Tokyo, has acquired substantially all of this Vision Fund 25% stake in ARM for $16.1 billion. The filing warned that this transaction might not be indicative of the ARM share price after the offering, which is why I was talking about earlier at the start of the video. I do think that SoftBank do not want to liquidate most of the shares that they actually got from Vision Fund. I do think that they still want to be controlled. They still want to be the controlling shareholder of ARM, simply because I do see the future of how ARM can actually make a lot of money, especially on the fact that they are doing a licensing technology. Okay, they're not just creating by manufacturing, but they're doing licensing. Basically, just think of it as a royalty on whatever that they have already done. cash burn is basically going to be pretty much quite low, and you're going to be getting a lot of high margin profits, which is what a lot of investors like to hear. However, this comes for us investors because the growth for such companies is not going to be super duper high. We're not going to see a hyper growth company going into into ARM. Of course, I could be wrong because this, I might say this right now, and then 4 years later, you see ARM just basically become the first $10 trillion valuation company. I don't know. Okay, I don't know. Okay, I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot tell you all that. But personally, I don't see ARM as a hyper growth company, especially because they have already started to side towards licensing as a business model. When you side towards licensing as a business model, there's a very, very good chance that you're not going to be seeing a lot of growth. Okay? Of course, when you don't see a lot of growth, it's also technically a good thing because at the same time, you're going to be quite safe and nothing's going to be disrupting you as much. Of course, if someone actually does it better and yada yada. So yeah, pretty interesting for SoftBank to actually want to remain as the controlling shareholder. I don't really see that as a surprise, but I just kind of interesting that they actually talked about it here as well. The paperwork also confirmed that ARM saw its revenue decline about 1% in its last fiscal year. The company still fell, yada yada, not important. The overall chip industry is still contending with a sales slump worsened by a glut of inventory. The smartphone market has been hit especially hard. Qualcomm, one of ARM's biggest customers, gave a disappointing forecast for the latest quarter earlier this month, sending its shares tumbling, and even Apple priced iPhone as seeing a demand slow. Okay, honestly, for the disappointing forecast for Qualcomm, honestly, when that actually came out, I was already expecting Apple price to get hit, especially with Apple's earnings as well. We do expect iPhone demand to actually be going down as well. A lot of people are expecting Apple to just keep on going up and up and up. Of course, if you're talking about in a 10-year duration, we are going to see up and down, and eventually having a trend upwards. But you cannot expect Apple to constantly be on a up. For Apple to be able to hit $3 trillion valuation as a whole company in terms of market cap was already a huge deal. For them to actually kind of just have a small bit of correction, I don't think there's going to be too much to ask for. Okay, but I do think that Apple is not going to stay down. I don't see Apple dropping all the way to $100 again. I do see Apple slowly climbing up, and then suddenly, maybe a year later or 2 years later, they're going to be talking about a stock split. That's what Apple do. Okay, Apple's just going to get bigger and bigger. Okay, tension with China could also cast a shadow over ARM's business. In the filing, the company pointed to export restriction from the US and UK as risk, hindering its ability to sell its Neoverse processor in China. Cool. Let's see, ARM plan to change, yada yada. In the filing, ARM called itself an engineering first company with 4,753 of its workers, or about 80% of global employees, focused on research, design, and technical innovation. The company said its own or co-own about 6,800 issued patents and has approximately 2,700 patent application pending worldwide. So yeah, that's true. I guess that they can easily, okay, to be fair, I think the patent side of things, patents in general is not going to be that hard to really get. Honestly, if you just find something that's going to be slightly different from whatever patent that is already existing right now, it is easy for you to actually go around it. And for them to actually talk about how they are going to be focused on research, design, and technical innovation, personally, like I talked about earlier, because of how far ahead ARM is already in terms of the different programming language that they have already set inside all those different chips, I don't see it as a hyper growth, but the thing is that they can try to improve upon themselves, but it's just that I don't really see the point because there's no really rival alongside them. If anything, just the x86 that Intel is actually using. So yeah, in terms of design, maybe technical innovation, I'm not sure. I think they're just using like buzzwords for them to actually put into the filing itself. But we never know. We might actually see some form of a innovation coming from ARM after the IPO. Maybe we actually see newer innovation in terms of the chips design as well. So in the last fiscal year, more than 260 companies were using ARM-based chips, including Amazon, Alphabet, Qualcomm, and AMD. The company has worked with its top 10 customers measured by royalty revenue for an average of more than 20 years. As the AI fever has swept the tech industry, companies will need the right chips to run complex software. ARM says that every processes it designed will accelerate the AI and machine learning tech, and it helps power. Its processors already run those technologies, and the company has started adding new functionality to make the algorithms run faster. As part of that push, ARM is working with Alphabet, autonomous driving company Cruise, Mercedes-Benz, Meta, NVIDIA to deploy ARM technology that can run AI-based software. So yeah, I do think that ARM is going to be a big company. Again, I do not want people to think that I'm, shortchanging ARM right now, thinking that ARM is not going to be a good company. Personally, I'm just a little bit more cautious about IPOs after what happened with Coinbase. Because of so much hype around such a good company, having good, possible business margin, business model around it, and then you do not want to get, unfortunate when the IPO actually stank. So when that actually happened, I do think that in the bigger picture of thing, I do think that ARM is a pretty good company, especially with all these big companies working with them as well. Alphabet, Mercedes-Benz, Meta, NVIDIA themselves as well. So I do think that that's going to be quite interesting. Okay, ARM was founded in 1990. I didn't know about that. Joint venture between Acorn Computers, Apple, and VLSI Tech. It was listed on the London Stock Exchange and Nasdaq from 1998 until 2016. That I knew about. I was talking about it earlier, I think, on my Instagram before I started making YouTube videos. But yeah, when SoftBank acquired the business for $32 billion. SoftBank previously attempted to sell ARM to NVIDIA in a $40 billion deal, which would have been the largest chip industry takeover, but the purchase faced opposition from regulators, and ARM-owned customer and NVIDIA walked away from it last year. SoftBank then embarked on its plan for the IPO. So when this actually happened, this was during the whole China regulatory lockdown, where they were actually pinpointing a lot of the different IPOs. That's when Alibaba got hit, that's when ARM got hit. This actually happened, I think, somewhere in the 2020 to 2021 period of time. That was actually quite interesting because that was also the time where I actually started really reading up on a lot of different news, and that was one of the few news that actually caught my eye. But yeah, anyway, that's all I have for this article. I thought it was really interesting to go through this whole entire thing, especially with ARM IPO. Like what I said before, it's going to be the largest IPO, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are going to be quite interested to see what this IPO have for them. But anyway, that's all I have for this video. I am going to be coming out with the symposium video, possibly. I think it's going to be next week after the symposium is done. I do want to talk a little bit more about what Jerome Powell will be talking about during the symposium as well, simply because we are kind of expecting a rate hike, but this symposium is the closest thing that we have to an FOMC meeting, simply because the next one that is available is going to be in September. But anyway, that's all. See you guys in the next one.